Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our two games is 2006's Gears of War, the technical showpiece at the beginning of the Xbox 360 era that cemented the system as the place where console gamers played shooters.
After that, it's the quirky psychic adventure that spawned one of the biggest cult followings in all of gaming, 1994's Earthbound.
Couple possible themes between the two games this week. One of them is aliens. The other being games that we just don't get along well with.
Boy, that's speaking lightly.
Because there are histories with these two. But like last week, we will start off the show by talking about any headlines that have come up as of late regarding our slate of composers that we have talked about so far on the show, any updated news about them. And we'll start kind of as a follow-up even from last episode, where there's the PAX West concert with Supergiant Games and their 10-year anniversary with Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett and Austin Wintory conducting the chamber orchestra. That happened. It seemed to go off very well. You can check out archives on Twitch. Maybe even they have an upload on YouTube. I'm sure that's out there somewhere. But yeah, kudos to them. That sounds like it went really well.
Meanwhile, Grant Kirkhope's remix of Spiral Mountain from Banjo-Kazooie is officially added to Smash, along with 6 others, because Banjo is out in Smash. We're actually recording literally like 10 minutes after, half an hour after that direct. So,
yeah, kind of a crazy one. So we're a little bit, a little bit loopy. So that would kind of be why. I don't think we're as loopy, though, as Toby Fox, because, boy, that Nintendo Direct was a big news bit for Toby Fox. First of all, starting with the game Town has been renamed to Little Town Hero, and then suddenly revealed that, yeah, Toby Fox is doing the music. Okay.
Just out of nowhere.
Game Freak, getting him to do that. That's awesome.
And not only that, but a Sans costume from Undertale got added to Smash as a purchasable, downloadable content piece. And it comes with a remix of Megalovania done by Toby Fox himself. Good day to be Toby Fox.
Now, it's a me costume, but Sans is in Smash, and I couldn't help but just burst out laughing when Masahiro Sakurai is like, he was very requested.
It's very popular in the West, and my roommate Ben's sitting there like, I'm sure he is.
But yeah, Megalovania, that track we talked about during that Undertale episode is now in Smash. My goodness, just amazing. Ooh. Big week of headlines, certainly. But I'm going to start talking about Gears of War. We're going to talk about the original Gears of War from 2006. Relevant because the episode when this comes out in public, that's the release date for Gears 5 on Xbox One. But if you are an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate member, you can play on Friday, which I will be with my brother. Because the last couple of Gears games have been really good, especially for co-op between us. I kind of like those, but the original Gears of War is one I have tried multiple times, and I just can't get past the beginning. It's just a weird sticking point for me. But because it's relevant, I'm going to talk about it. And so hopefully you get to learn some things like I did about the original Gears of War. So Epic Games, before they were a company only making Fortnite, it seems, Fortnite content, as well as the extensive licensing of the Unreal Engine, they were a video game company who made video games. Apparently, the first concept for Gears of War was kind of worked up around 2000, 2001-ish as Unreal Warfare, because Epic at the time was known for the Unreal Tournament series. It was a game that was supposed to feature character classes and mechs in this closed arena against other players or bots, But then at that time, that was really when Unreal Tournament took off. So when this concept was ultimately revisited, the focus now at Epic Games was single-player games. So Gears of War released on November 7th, 2006 in North America on Xbox 360. In Europe, they got the game on November 17th, Australia, November 23rd. So pretty close within the same month overall. There was a PC version that was released almost a year later to the day on November 6th, 2007. This included updated content, including added story content, and expanded Act 5 of the game and other tweaks. There were some controversies that Xbox 360 players should be able to get the content, but they're not because it's different. It was a weird time. Games for Windows Live, just a problem on PC. Then there was Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which was a remastered version that was made by the Coalition, who is now the team that works on Gears things. There was enhanced gameplay that they borrowed from other elements from the different games, as well as enhanced graphics. That was released on August 25th, 2015 on Xbox One and March 1st, 2016 on PC. It is developed by Epic Games and published by Microsoft Game Studios. The studio group that has kind of gone through different name changes, but at the time in 2006, Microsoft Game Studios. Gears of War, which is different than God of War, even though people do, GOW. Gears of War, it's a third-person shooter. Has this bulky characters, this dystopic military sci-fi theming going on, and it is heavily reliant on cover mechanics and mobility between those shoulder-high walls, or chest-high walls, or however people describe it. It is unique because one of its primary gameplay mechanics that it really kind of created on its own, not really picked up in other game series, but something that's distinctly Gears, is the active reload system. When you're reloading one of your guns, you don't just press a button and they go through a canned animation. No, a little slider appears in the upper right corner of your HUD, and there's a sweet spot that you can hit to press the reload button again. And if you hit that sweet spot, the reloading speed is much faster. If you miss it significantly, it takes a while to reload. So it adds a bit of variety and a little more interactivity to that reload mechanic. There's also the Lancer, that is the iconic weapon from the Gears of War series, which is essentially an assault rifle that has an attached chainsaw blade on top of it. So, and a whole lot of chainsawing enemies happen in the Gears of War series, especially in those early games. So what is the plot of the original Gears of War? It has been 14 years since Emergence Day, or E-Day as it's known in the world, when the Locust alien race invaded and attacked humanity on the planet Sera, S-E-R-A. Now there's the Coalition of Ordered Governments, or COG. And the COG is humanity's last stand, essentially. And the COG's soldiers are called Gears, thus Gears of War. Now, Marcus Phoenix is your protagonist in this game, and he's spent the last 4 years in Jacinto Maximum Security Prison. He abandoned his military post in a vain attempt to save his father, Adam, 4 years ago. And so you left your duty. That's a court-martialing for you. But humanity is desperate, really, to push back the Locust horde. So Marcus is extracted from prison to join his allies in the Delta Squad, which includes his good buddy Dominic Dom Santiago, Augustus Cole, and Damon Baird. The whole question really is, can Delta Squad help defeat the Locust? That's aliens. They're there. You beat them back with guns and chainsaws. What more do you want to know? So, what are our experiences with Gears of War?
Literally nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Never touched a game. Barely ever seen trailers. Barely ever seen gameplay. I know nothing. Have zero interest or experience with Gears of War. It's just not my kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a shooter boy. I never have been, really.
I am in certain extents. Like I said, this first Gears of War is one that I have real big sticking point problems with for whatever reason. I find it sluggish. Going back to it is a little rough. It's dated by that sense. But yeah, it's just not a fun, engaging game to me. Now, the current games, I mean, they're gorgeous. And I'm actually pretty excited to play Gears 5. I have it preloaded right now on Xbox One because, yeah, it's good in co-op. It's real good in co-op. I don't know about single player. Maybe a little rough there. But yeah, so my knowledge on this game is pretty limited. And hopefully, that doesn't come across a whole lot in the Critical 5 when we get to it, but it very well might. So it may not be as verbose in that section, but it's one of those ones where, like, you put on a Pandora playlist of video game music, and this is a soundtrack that pretty commonly comes up. So I find myself certainly more familiar with certain tracks on the soundtrack more than I am with the Gears of War game itself. Not that it's a bad thing or anything. It's like I recognize those songs, but not necessarily what their context is in the larger story. But learning about Gears of War was pretty interesting, actually. Apparently, the total cost of development was about $10 million. And it's not a game that had like 100 people working on it. Apparently, only about 20 to 30 people were involved with the development at the time. Now, the lead designer of Gears of War was where a certain man made a name for himself, and that man was one Cliff Bleszinski. The lead designer at the time at Epic Games, like, Gears of War was his baby, his big pet project. Those first 3 games, like, him to a T. He would go on to have quite the career after that, and certain crashes and burns therein, but...
Just a couple.
But Gears of War was where Cliffy B made a name for himself, certainly. He said that 3 games inspired the design for Gears of War. There was, first of all, Resident Evil 4, because everybody loves Resident Evil 4 for its third-person shooting perspective. There was a game from Namco, I believe, called Kill Switch, which apparently had this tactical cover system. And then, of all things, Bionic Commando. Bionic Commando more for the need of needing to move to different platforms. The idea for Gears of War, of course, being that you're in this cover system, but you got to move across the battlefield, get to these different covers, stick to that, different angles on your enemies. But it's all about that movement. It's not about hunkering down and staying in one place. For Bionic Commando, it's the same way, where you don't have the robot arm or whatever, the wife arm, so to speak.
Wife arm!
To swing around in different places. But, I guess that was an interesting game to, draw inspiration from as well. I mean, the original Bionic Commando, not the Rad Spencer late 2000s one. He also cited The Legend of Zelda for its storytelling, its world-building elements, the idea of acquiring and mastering tools, as well as underground environments. And then even the name Gears of War is an homage, apparently, to Metal Gear, which was apparently a formative game for Bleszinski, and, just a deep respect for Hideo Kojima. Gears of War, at the time, was a technical showpiece, which is crazy to think of, but you got to realize it was a different time going into that new generation in, developing during 2005, releasing in 2006 on, the early times of Xbox 360. The game was first shown at Epic's Unreal Engine 3 showcase at GDC 2005. Early 2005, generally around March is when GDC takes place. It was an unnamed title then that would run on the Xenon processor of the new Xbox at the time. Now, Epic's Tim Sweeney apparently had conversations with Microsoft and convinced them to double the RAM in the Xbox 360 from 256 megabytes to 512. Now, granted, currently Xbox One X has 12 gigabytes of RAM. And, that's just pretty crazy. Just, the steep increase over time of computer technology. But because of this doubling of RAM, it allowed Gears of War to run at an amazing 720p.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, in 2006, I mean, that was Nintendo releasing the Wii to say, we don't need to release an HD console. Those HD TVs aren't the norm in everyone's houses. And so they got away with that for a few years. But again, 2006, a 720p game. Oh man, like that's a big deal. A lot of people really remember the marketing campaign for Gears of War, though, and the famous trailer where Gary Jules' cover of Mad World played. And I think for a long time at least, maybe even still to this day, that Mad World trailer is what a lot of people point to as what video game trailers should aspire to. Because I mean, just the masterful use of that music with Marcus running through a desolate city. I mean, that was a big deal for game trailers at the time.
I don't even remember that trailer at all.
Oh,
I don't think I've ever even seen it.
Wow. No, it's a good one. It's certainly well known. And speaking of Marcus Phoenix, voiced by the legendary John DiMaggio, you may know him for roles as Bender from Futurama or Jake the Dog from Adventure Time.
Or Waka from Final Fantasy X.
Absolutely. But he's Marcus Phoenix, and he's got this real gruff voice. It's working for him. So, yeah, good casting on that front. Gears of War has a Metacritic score currently standing at 94. Great reviews at the time. It was the second highest rated game of 2006, behind The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. If anything, Eurogamer's 8 out of 10 review score was probably the toughest. They had an interesting quote that said, quote, "Let's not pretend that we're wallowing in the future of entertainment. What we have here is an extremely competent action game that's as polished and refined as it could be, and is therefore very enjoyable." So, like, it's not the future of games, but it's good for what it is. It's really good. So that's certainly interesting, because when it came to the 2006 Video Game Awards show season, Gears of War was one of the most awarded games of that year. Easily a standout title. When it came to awards shows like the DICE Awards for the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, it was nominated for 10 categories. It won 8, including Game of the Year. It also won Game of the Year at the GDC Awards. But I gotta call out some attention to the BAFTAs that year. Gears of War was nominated 5 times in different categories. It didn't win anything. It wasn't even nominated for Best Game for that category. What were the nominees for Best Game that year? There was Black, Brain Age, Guitar Hero, Hitman Blood Money. We talked about that one. That's actually a pretty good one. Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy. And what ended up winning Best Game that year at the BAFTAs? Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. Kind of a strange list.
Brain Age?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Whatever.
Getting a DS game in there. I don't know. I found that a little unusual. Gears of War ultimately became a very prominent franchise for the Xbox brand. I mean, you had sequels easily in the works. There was 2008's Gears of War 2, 2011's Gears of War 3, and then there was the spin-off that they don't really like all that much. It's Gears of War Judgment from 2013, where Baird was the playable character, and it's a strange game. Then on January 27th, 2014, Microsoft Studios acquired the rights to the intellectual property from Epic. So then that's where you get Gears of War 4 in 2016, and out now Gears 5 here in 2019. Gears of War is apparently also one of those forever in Hollywood limbo projects. There's apparently, as far as back as 2007, the rights to a film were acquired, and then it's kind of happening. And then suddenly there was a news announcement that Dave Bautista is going to be a playable character in the multiplayer for Gears 5, and he is seeming to mention that it's been a dream sort of thing. In the past, he said Marcus Phoenix would be a dream casting for him. And there's a news release that kind of mentions that, oh, maybe that'll happen. Maybe but he wants to do this first. If Dave Bautista is Marcus Phoenix in a Gears of War movie, that's perfect casting. That'd be really cool. But again, it's one of those movies that it's like Uncharted, like Metal Gear Solid. Is it ever going to happen? Who knows?
There are a lot of these movies that are just like, oh man, this video game did really well at one point. Let's make a movie. Oh, that movie never came out. And I honestly, most of them, I just assume they never will.
That's probably a good assumption at that point. But Gears of War was also so popular and influential that it really lent its mechanics to other games going forward, especially when those games use the Unreal Engine. I mean, the most prominent example we can look at is the Mass Effect series. You look at the first Mass Effect, it's very RPG heavy, but Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, the more action that was infused in those games with the Unreal Engine, that is straight Gears of War cover shooting mechanics with a little bit of freeze time, cast powers, whatever, but sticking to those walls, shooting, that's Gears of War all over it. So its impacts are still felt today, but really especially in those late aughts and early 2010s.
Lest we forget the age of the chest high wall.
Yes. What a time it was, and still persists in a little bit to this day. When it comes to the music for Gears of War, it belongs to one Kevin Riepl. Kevin Riepl, born in Cliffwood Beach, New Jersey. He learned piano and guitar at age 6 under the instruction of his uncle. Now, the score for Star Wars was apparently something that really intensified his interest in music. So he wanted to learn how to play the trumpet. And he did so in about 4th grade or so. And throughout high school, he was a member of different bands and orchestras. I can relate. That was me. I was a band kid in high school. I played the sax, though. So not really a member of any symphony orchestras, but yeah, trumpet would be good for both of those, certainly. Now, after high school, he began private independent studies when it came to composition and orchestration at the Village East Conservatory of Music, before he then moved on to the Man's College of Music in New York City. In his early professional career, he worked with Kevin Menthe, kind of in like the early 2000s or so, until Cliff Bleszinski discovered his demo reel. Now, Cliff was looking for a different sound for the Unreal Tournament series and really liked Kevin's music. So Kevin Riepl was assigned to work on the Unreal Tournament series, starting with Unreal Tournament 2003. He did get picked for Gears of War as well, and it was his first time working with a live recorded orchestra for one of his scores. The Wikipedia article for Kevin Riepl then throws you for a loop, and I'll quote it here. Quote, in October 2010, Riepl suffered a sudden heart failure and was hospitalized. He had a pump installed in his heart until a donor heart could replace it, and underwent the heart transplant in July 2011. Shortly afterwards, a rare tumor was found on his adrenal gland, which was affecting his blood pressure. He has since made a good recovery. Holy crap!
Yeah, that's a bit of a change of tone.
Yeah, that's a big swerve, but glad he is with us and still doing great work, working on games, films, TV. His game discography, of course, includes Gears of War. There were some tracks on Gears of War 2, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The Unreal Tournament series since 2003 has had a prominent hand in that, and I think even when they're working on a new Unreal Tournament game, he probably was working on that game as well. Aliens Colonial Marines, rough game, but very good music. He also worked on Crackdown 2 and Resistance Burning Skies. I thought you'd be interested to know that along with Kevin Menthe, he worked on apparently 6 Nancy Drew games, including some of the ones that were mentioned on the Wikipedia article being Secret of the Scarlet Hand, Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, and The Haunted Carousel.
I'm having flashbacks to the war. I've played one of those.
Oh, yeah?
I played Secret of the Scarlet Hand. It's not very good. It's actually the worst one I've played. So I guess I should give quick context for anybody that doesn't know. I play Nancy Drew games because our friend Moses has cursed me. Some of them are pretty all right. Some of them are, one of them is very good. Secret of the Scarlet Hand is really bad and really boring. I haven't played Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake or Haunted Carousel yet, though. So
Apparently there were a few others, but at least those were the ones that were mentioned. In interviews, the interviewer said, like, and you've worked on 6 Nancy Drew games, but only those 3 were cited on Wikipedia. So go figure. For films, he recently scored Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's worked on some horror films, which actually makes sense based on his style of composing. There's Silent Night, Contracted, Cabin Fever, Patient Zero. And in his earlier days, he worked on Sky High as a music programmer, that Disney original movie. So
I didn't realize movies needed music programmers.
you never know. When it came to TV, there was Justice League Action. He co-composed Brandy and Mr. Whiskers with Kevin Manthe as well.
Why do I remember that? Why do I remember that show?
I think that was one where Kaylee Cuoco was the voice of Brandy, the golden retriever dog that was anthropomorphic in a sense. I think that was that show.
I believe, yeah, you're thinking of the right one. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. It's a weird pull, but okay. And he also provided additional music to Invader Zim, Shaolin Showdown, and Johnny Test. I think even for Johnny Test, he did the main title composition as well. So interesting selections there. For Gears of War's historical development, it was Riepl's work on the game that began in around February 2005. So year and a half before the game came out. Originally, he was only assigned to write the main themes, but Epic Games liked what he did so much that they expanded his role to include the entire score. So it's a pretty darn good first impression. There was all sorts of concept material and backstory that was done in pre-production to really help kind of formulate the creative process for the score. But he received early builds of the game with cinematics about halfway through development. And so from there on, he closely collaborated with the development team on what influence the music should have on the player and the story. The game overall had a theme of destroyed beauty, which applied not only to the visuals, but the music as well. In the different combat encounter themes, the score included things such as mechanical percussive elements, altered samples of explosions, hits and impacts, as well as electric guitar stingers. The orchestral sound, though, that was added also really just fleshed the sound out, and that was recorded by the Northwest Sinfonia Orchestra. Kevin Riepl worked on Gears of War 2's score for about 10 months, and he said it was about 50 minutes worth of music before they had Steve Jablonsky sign on for the series, at least until Gears of War Judgment. Now, some of Riepl's ambient tracks still stayed in the game. He was still credited for the game as additional music, but he didn't really mention in that interview why they made that drastic change. So, unfortunate, because I think Gears of War, the first one's score, really stands out more than the others. Just my opinion. If you're wondering who's composing Gears 5 as well as composed Gears of War 4, that's Ramin Djawadi, who you may know from the Game of Thrones score.
He also scored Pacific Rim.
Yeah, plenty of other ones. I think I'd like to get to him eventually to talk about his works. So they're fascinating, certainly. Let's talk about those 5 critical tracks, though. And I can only provide so much on this one, but I think I was able to pick 5 pretty easily. And we got to start with the title track, Gears of War. Certainly the main theme, one of those iconic themes in gaming, especially in the mid-2000s. You hear this one with those horns, and it's just badass. Like, it's one of the, again, we talk about certain songs where it's like, yep, it had to be here. This is the definitive one. You've probably heard this one before. That's this song to a T. If you got to be able to peg that this one is from Gears of War.
I can't. Like I said, I have zero experience, so I've never heard this song before. This is my first time.
Well, you got some learning to do then, because this
sounds like it.
This is the one that you got to peg to this game for sure. The others, not as much, but this one, certainly. I wouldn't expect many to be able to peg the next one, though. Certainly, this one is Jacinto Prison. This one comes from the opening level where you're breaking Marcus out of prison. So I recognize this one the most because it's the one I've played the most, trying to give this one another shot. And so it's certainly one that sticks in my ear. But I don't know, maybe not for the best of reasons, but it's still a very good piece. It's good musical introduction to kind of get you into the game. These quiet woodwinds are just kind of there, kind of lingering in the background, where the percussion and bass just really keep up this deliberate pace, just keep pushing forward. Like, you have bigger things ahead of you. The score gets only more intense from here, but you have work to do. The cogs have work to do there against the Locust. So yeah, I do like this one a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot more. Quiet woodwinds is not something I expect to hear from a game called Gears of War. With the very little I know about the game and its big, huge, manly, car-sized men. So that was certainly a surprise to hear. I'll give it that.
Yeah. We really ramp things up here for number 3 on the Critical 5. And this is Fish in a Barrel. Now, I don't know where this plays in the game, but I get the sense that this is like, we're getting introduced to some bad dudes. I don't know if it's General Rom, the final boss of the game, but this is intense. Like, oh, damn. Like, just really good, the really deep brass and these just heavy melodic, just going at it. Like, it's real good bad guy material right here. So yeah, I wish I had context to know where this plays in the game, but this really stands out. It's like, it catches your ear and it's like, trouble is ahead.
I could see this being a final boss. I think you might be right. Look, I got all the same information you do.
It's not final boss, but because I think it's kind of like early to middle in the soundtrack listing, but if it's not like introducing a significant villain,
because like I only know General Ram because he's in Killer Instinct.
You're right, he is. And so technically Kevin Riepl has a credit on Killer Instinct Season 3 because of Gears of War theme being used there. So interesting there. Number 4 on the Critical 5, Trainwreck Locust theme. I mean, it's pretty important because it's the Locust theme. So it's certainly a leitmotif that will represent the enemy horde in this game. And I think it's a really in a way, it's a perfect complement to the Gears of War theme. It's darker. It's a little more twisted, but it kind of gives you that same feeling like, you know, these two forces are going to butt heads. But yeah, I mean, when it's called Locust theme, yeah, it's a track kind of near the end of the game, but it's really representative of this force that you're going up against. And I like it. I like it a lot. And it's one that does pop up a lot when it's on places like Pandora or whatever. So it's another pretty recognizable track from the soundtrack, but I wouldn't say it's iconic level like Gears of War is.
I think this is my favorite song on your Critical 5 here. I don't know. Something about that. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good one for sure. But we end the 5 set here with Train Ride to Hell. And like the final boss takes place on a train. It's a slog against General Ram. I don't know where exactly this song takes place, but like it's basically the last one on the soundtrack. So it's got to be in Endgame, whether it's during the final boss or the final cutscene. It just had to be here. Like especially these string chords at the end, and it kind of like softens out a little bit. Just gives like a really good balance to these really like heavy brass hits throughout the score. So I know those last two kind of get paired together pretty frequently, but I think they both have to be here. They're really good ones.
The ending of the clip specifically, does that sound like Arkham City to you?
A little bit. I can hear it. I can hear it for sure.
It's got a very similar feel to it. Obviously, this would have come first.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't know. That threw me off a little bit.
I can get it. I totally understand that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to tracks on the cutting room floor, I wanted to put a couple here. Different sounds overall, but I really wanted to put 14 Years After E-Day on the list. Because this is another one that takes place really early in the game. A lot of exposition storytelling going on here, but it's soft, it's spooky, and the wavering of these pitches, the da 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 dum bam ba dum ba da, like it's undeniably Gears. And so like maybe I should have put it on the list, but those 5 really stuck out and jumped out to me first. But this is another one where it's like, oh yeah, this is the first Gears of War score, absolutely. But it had to be here in some capacity, unfortunately, on the cutting room floor. The other one is I Will Krill You. The Krill are these, I think they're these bat-like creatures that are just a pain and just eat up your shields like crazy. Think of like floods of Keese, essentially. I think that's a good way of putting it, like, you know, Legend of Zelda enemies here. It's just another good, intense battle piece. And I really like the sound of the brass chords at the end of the clip. Like that when I was listening through the whole soundtrack, that really jumped out to me. It wasn't good enough for me to put it in the top 5, but I'm like, I'll give that a cutting room floor shout out. So, what will I never forget about Gears of War? Yeah, like I said, I can't get past the beginning of this game for whatever reason. I don't know why. So maybe I need to try the Ultimate Edition because it kind of fixes some of these gameplay things and it sort of just makes it look prettier. Because yeah, going back to 2006, after you've played so many cover shooters through the late aughts, through the early 2010s. It's a little rough going back to what started it all. But the series is fine. Like I said, I'm looking forward to playing Gears 5, especially in co-op. So it's not a series I have problems with, but this game, for whatever reason, I struggle with.
Maybe one day I'll play it. Probably not, though.
Yeah, it's a little rough. I don't blame you. It's interesting with Gears 5, Rod Ferguson of the Coalition is really out there saying oh no, this is a good starting point. You can start at Gears 5. It's okay. And it's I get you want more sales, but is it really?
That's it feels like somebody coming out and being like, oh, you can start at Yakuza 6, you'll be fine. And then every it depends on what the fans are saying, because every Yakuza fan will tell you don't do that.
Yeah, so I don't know about that. To transition to the next game, we like to highlight a fan cover, whether it's on OC Remix on YouTube. I found one on YouTube from Bader Nana, Baderna. It's a rock version of Gears of War, that main theme, and it sounds so good with that instrumentation, so please enjoy. We'll be right back.
So let's talk about Earthbound. Complete change of gears here. Pun sort of intended. Earthbound was originally released for the Super Famicom on August 27th, 1994 in Japan, with a North American release following the next year on June 5th, 1995. You might notice that I didn't mention a European release. We'll get to that. So, it is known as Mother 2 in Japan because it is actually a sequel. It is the sequel to the Famicom game Mother. Mother never came out in the West, despite the fact that there was a full localization done. Just done. Nintendo had it. It was finished. But it never actually came out for two reasons that have been cited in the past. One being that they kind of realized that the game was too big to really fit on an NES cartridge very well. And the other being Super Nintendo was about to come out. Why bother? So, game just never came out. They localized it completely, never got released. So for this reason, in America, the game was changed to Earthbound to avoid confusion as to Mother 2, what about Mother 1? The game follows a young boy named Ness, who, when a meteor crashes right outside of his small hometown in Wanette, awakens to psychic powers and is sent on a journey to stop an apocalyptic event that will be caused by a cosmic threat known as Gigas. He does this by journeying to the 8 My Sanctuary locations around the world and gathering the power that is present at each of these locations. Along the way, he picks up 3 party members: Paula, a young girl from the town of Tucson, who has very similar psychic powers to Ness. In fact, she might actually be a little bit stronger when it comes to being psychic. A child genius from Winters named Jeff. And Pooh, a prince from the far-off land of Dalam, who has psychic powers of his own, his being a result of training throughout his life. Throughout the game, this group is also chasing after Ness's neighbor and generally unlikable person, Pokey Minch, as he keeps sticking his nose into things and making everything worse for everybody around him. The game is a JRPG, meaning that it's got, sort of random encounters, turn-based battles, level ups, abilities you get at certain levels, stats, etc., etc., etc. However, instead of the usual turn-based stuff, Earthbound uses something that is a weird mix of turn-based and Final Fantasy's ATB system, almost, I want to say. That's the best I can come up with to describe it. Basically, at the start of every round, you select what everybody is going to do in that round, and the order in which everybody goes, including the enemies, is decided by their speed stat. It's also very famous for its rolling health, which in most RPGs, when you get hit by an attack, the damage is subtracted from your health immediately. And if you hit 0, you just immediately die. In Earthbound, it's a little bit different, in which if you are hit by a mortal blow, the health starts to tick down to 0 instead of immediately hitting 0, unless you're hit by something like PK Flash, which has a chance of being an instant kill. Thanks, Gigas. And you can, if you heal them before it hits 0, then you will save them from death. It is known for its quirky sense of humor and its fun characters, as well as a very unique setting that is sort of a caricature of America. But the game is highly divisive when it comes to whether or not people think it's actually good. So what are our experiences with Earthbound? Because God knows everybody else knows mine.
Yeah, like you with Gears of War, I'm not going to say I'm ignorant of Earthbound things. I mean, I'm familiar with Super Smash Brothers. I know of Ness and Paula and Jeff and Pooh, and Pokey and things like that, and Gigas, but I have zero interest to play this game, especially when I hear of your adventures.
Yeah, for people that don't know, I've mentioned it a couple of times on this show. I do another podcast with our friend Matt called Smasterpieces, where we're playing one game for every character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And Ness is in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and there's really no other option than Earthbound. 3 months! Granted, the fact that it took so long isn't entirely the game's fault. It's also like E3 happened that month, and Matt moved to a new apartment, and a bunch of other stuff that got in the way. But like, this game feels like it was an era of my life, despite only being 3 months. Played the whole thing. We did finish it. There are 4 entire episodes of Smasterpieces, just us talking about Earthbound, that you can go listen to if you want my full thoughts on the game. But let me sum it up for you. I didn't enjoy my time.
Yeah, you stuck yourself with talking about it again here. It fits for the theme of, games that just don't sit well with us.
At the very least, one of the things I do really like about Earthbound is the soundtrack. It is very good. So I can at least talk about that in a happy manner. So, Mother, the first game, was released in Japan in 1989 for the Famicom and got generally good reception upon release, with Famitsu giving it a 31 out of 40, and reviewers commenting on how they liked that it billed itself as a parody of RPGs, but also didn't stray too far away from what makes the genre unique. There were some criticisms about how the game was way too hard, and also not very well balanced at all, but it still managed to sell about 150,000 copies, and that's on the Famicom, having only been released in Japan. So it wasn't the biggest splash, but it did pretty all right. The series is the brainchild of Shigesato Itoi, who served as lead designer, writer, and director for the first game. Itoi's background is not actually entirely in video games. In fact, the Mother franchise and a bass fishing game are the only 4 games he's ever made. Though, he seems like somebody that kind of like puts his finger in every pie he possibly can. He writes books, he does voice acting, he does live acting, he has a weekly newsletter, probably multiple, I can't tell. And he does a lot of stuff. Notably, for his voice acting stuff, he actually plays the dad in the Japanese dub of, I shouldn't call it the dub, in the Japanese version of My Neighbor Totoro.
Oh, that's a weird pull.
Yeah, little bit, isn't it? So the dad in My Neighbor Totoro canonically made Earthbound now. Itoi was also the founder of Ape Inc., by suggestion of then Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi, who I guess just went to him and was like, hey, you should make a game. Here's some money, make a studio. Like, that's apparently exactly how it went down. Yamauchi was a weird man.
Mm-hmm.
The development of Earthbound took place over 5 years, apparently by almost an entirely different team than the people that made the first Mother. And Wikipedia is careful to mention this, so I figured I should too. Because most of the members of the team were unmarried, they were apparently perfectly fine to work overnight on the project.
Crunch culture.
Woo! Still just as big then as it is today. In fact, probably was worse back then. However, the game taking 5 years to make was not the plan. And the game was shaping up to take a lot longer than it was supposed to. In fact, it almost got canceled a couple of times. For this reason, HAL Laboratories was brought in to help with the project, including, most notably, Satoru Iwata, who did a lot of the programming on Earthbound. HAL took over most of the game's programming, while Ape worked on specific smaller scale aspects of the game, whether it be programming smaller things or design or things like that. An initial thought for the game, apparently, was to have a space travel feature and have it revolve around going to different planets instead of just being confined to one planet. But Itoi decided that this was a cliche idea and threw it out 4 months into development, deciding instead that he wanted to make a game that would appeal to audiences outside of the usual target demographics of the time, including girls, which a lot of games back then weren't really working towards that demographic, which was a big loss. So Itoi was ahead of his time with that.
But did he really succeed in that end, though?
Hey, Paula is cool.
Paula is cool, but I don't know if when it becomes a big cult hit, sure, but I don't know about the demographic spread.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what demographic Earthbound was going for. I mean, it obviously hit it, but I don't know how to describe that demographic. The rolling health feature apparently initially started as pachinko balls that would fall off the screen every time a character was hit. But then they realized that in RPGs, near the end of the game, characters get a lot of health. And so that's a lot of pachinko balls. And they figured, all right, that's probably not going to work. So in the final game, it's more of an odometer. Those, if you don't know what an odometer is, first off, how? Second of all, it's the things that count how many miles you have on a car, the rolling wheels, which I guess a lot of them are digital nowadays, but you should know what an odometer is.
Go watch Matilda. Danny DeVito's Matilda.
And this ended up flowing a lot better for the direction they were going. Iwata, at certain points, mentioned that Ape's programming team seemed especially eager to tackle challenging mechanics, likely due to Itoi's development process that he described as, quote, reckless wildness. Itoi's goal was to be constantly coming up with new ideas in order to encourage his team to think outside the box and try and think of ideas that video games weren't doing during that time. And he succeeded. To be fair, another up that I can give to Earthbound, despite not really enjoying the game, is that there are a lot of ways in which that game is kind of really progressive. Granted, there are just as many ways where the game feels dated as hell, but stuff like if you back attack an enemy that you are way, way over leveled to fight, you'll just instantly win and get the experience. Or the fact that when you die, it doesn't boot you to the title screen. Something that a lot of other, not just RPGs, but a lot of other games did back then. I just finished playing Donkey Kong Country for Smash Pieces, and it does that. That's a thing I can give, I can give a props on. Apparently, when trying to think up the names for the main characters, the default names, obviously you can name all 4 of your party members in Earthbound, but they have default names, Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Boo. Itoi came up with those names because he didn't like any of the suggestions that his team brought up, which I want to hear what those suggestions were. Desperately. Also, NPCs around the game were apparently based on actual real-life personalities. The example that Wikipedia included was the miners in Dusty Dunes Desert are based on real executives from a major Japanese construction company. So, alrighty. Whether that is a compliment or an insult, I couldn't tell you. but they're there. Also, another big sort of unique thing about Earthbound is the battle backgrounds. So like if you've never seen a fight in Earthbound, they've got these trippy backgrounds in the back, and it's very, very weird. I just realized recently, actually, when Ness does his Final Smash in Ultimate, the background changes into an Earthbound battle background.
Interesting.
It's really cool. I didn't notice that until a couple weekends ago when we were playing and somebody happened to use the Final Smash and somebody else pointed it out. These were made by one person, and there are almost 200 of them. And this was apparently this person's only job for 2 years. Itoi refers to these backgrounds as, quote, video drug, which that's not entirely wrong. They're very psychedelic and trippy and weird.
I mean, I get it.
But the main thing that you might be familiar with when it comes to Earthbound, the thing that everybody knows about, is the final boss fight with Gigas. It is the most famous thing from the entire game. Everybody knows about it. Since its inception, since it's been made public, there have been many urban legends about what inspired the fight with Gigas. Most of them sort of right, but not really. According to Itoi, the fight with Gigas is inspired by some childhood trauma that was the result of him accidentally walking into a screening of the film The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty, specifically a scene where a woman is violently murdered.
Like if you walked into Psycho at that scene, yeah, it could kind of mess you up.
Little bit, especially if you were very young. Another fun fact that means nothing to anybody but me, I guess. Itoi's favorite town in the game is Threed. But before that, his favorite was apparently Summers. I don't know what happened to make him change his mind about Summers being his favorite, but that's exactly how it's worded. So, when I say that the game was not really meant to take 5 years in development, the original release date was January of 1993. But the game changed scope twice. The second one saw the game moving from a 12 megabit cartridge to a 24 megabit cartridge, which needed more time to develop, which also gave them a little bit of time to add a little bit more personality and flair to the game. And it pushed the release date back a year. And according to them, development was completed on the game in May of 1994. According to Itoi, Miyamoto loved the game. Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario and Zelda and all them, he loved the game. And it was one of the first RPGs that he had ever completed. In fact, not one of, the first RPG that Miyamoto ever completed. And knowing what I know about Miyamoto, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
That checks out 100%. That seems entirely at Miyamoto's alley. So, another very interesting section of Earthbound's development pre-release is its localization. Localization of the game initially started with Dan Osen, or Dan Osen. I don't know how to pronounce that, but we'll say I got it right. Being in charge of the localization. However, he got about 10% into the script and then had to move on to other projects. So, from there, localization was handled entirely by Marcus Lindholm. That's right. One person. Lindholm was apparently given a lot of liberties to make the script, quote, as weird as possible. And he says that he found a huge challenge in translating what he described as an outsider's view of the US. Before I go any further, I believe there's actually a book about the localization of Earthbound, Legends of Localization. I think Fangamer sells it. I don't know if Lindholm wrote it, but I do know that it's just all about the different localization changes they had to make in Earthbound and why. I would love to read it. It sounds fascinating, honestly. But as expected from localization, a lot of changes had to be made to the game. Side note, Wikipedia, at the start of the localization section of this game's article, felt it needed to describe or explain what localization means. which, in my opinion, if you're looking up Earthbound, you probably already know. Different puns and jokes that would only make sense in Japanese, as is usual, were replaced with references to things like Bugs Bunny and the film This Is Spinal Tap. I think I remember seeing the Bugs Bunny reference. I don't remember seeing the Spinal Tap reference.
I was just about to ask, where do they turn it up to 11 in that game?
That has to be the reference, right? That's the
gotta
only one anybody knows.
Yeah.
But I don't remember seeing that at any point. Other notable changes include the removal of references to real-world logos, like a Coca-Cola logo on the side of a truck. Also, references to religion, because this was during that time, which included things like the crosses on tombstones. All right, sure, whatever. And the red crosses on hospitals, which...
That's a little extreme.
Real hospitals have those.
I get crosses on tombstones, but the red cross is not representing Catholicism?
It's a universal symbol for hospital.
Like health.
And also any references to alcohol were changed to coffee, which I think you can buy a cup of coffee in Earthbound. Does that mean in Japan, Ness can just get drunk?
It's Japan, probably.
That's weird. Ness is like 10. Another notable change is that members of the Blue Cult in Happy Happy Village were changed to look a little bit less like the Ku Klux Klan, because that would not fly in America. They still look a lot like the Ku Klux Klan, but I don't remember what exactly they added, but they still look a lot like them. I think they rounded the tip of their hoods. But they're still very obviously supposed to be the KKK.
Wow.
Probably the most famous change is that in Magicant, which is a world, after you get all of the My Sanctuary locations, Ness is transported to a world within his mind called Magicant. In Japan, in the Japanese version, Ness is naked during this section, because in Japanese culture, nakedness is seen as a symbol of purity. In America, it's just a kid running around naked, which we don't look too fondly upon, so Ness is in his pajamas in the American version. So despite huge success in Japan, selling almost 300,000 copies, Earthbound kind of tanked in America, selling 140,000 copies total. That's less than Mother 1 sold in Japan.
Yeah, wow.
This is largely considered to be the fault of multiple things, not the least of which was Nintendo of America's awful and bizarre marketing campaigns for it. The most famous being the This Game Stinks campaign, which were magazine ads. Magazine ads with scratch and sniff that made bad smells. How does that advertise Earthbound?
It doesn't really.
There is one section of the entire game where bad smells are even a theme. What?
4D.
You want to know the worst part about how bad the marketing was? The budget was $2 million.
Which may not sound like a lot now, but in mid-90s money, pretty good.
Mid-90s, that was like a modest game budget. So yeah, it didn't sell well. And due to the fact that this game sold like ass in America, and the fact that the N64 was pretty much on the horizon already, Earthbound was not released in Europe at all. In any way. So, despite this, though, Earthbound would go on to create probably the biggest cult following in video games. I can't think of a bigger one. I don't think there is one. This is it. This is the biggest one. With people inspired by Earthbound ranging from Toby Fox of Undertale fame, who we've already mentioned this episode where that took him, and I found interesting, Trey Parker, one of the co-creators of South Park, was apparently an Earthbound fan.
I can see that for sure.
I can kind of see that, I guess. I'm not a fan of South Park either, so hey, He got that part right. The game has since built a rabid fan base, which, after much lobbying, finally convinced Nintendo to release it on Wii U. Virtual Console, specifically, in 2013. Not only that, but on the same day, they also finally released the localization of Mother 1, now officially renamed Earthbound Beginnings, after sitting on the finished localization for decades. So they finally got their thing. Earthbound also got a sequel, being Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance in 2006, but it was never released outside of Japan, and despite massive fan outcry from people who will never shut up, it probably never will be. It's just not worth it for them to go localize the game so that a small subset of people can buy it. And I know people are like, but Earthbound Beginnings came out. And again, that's because the localization was already done. It costed them $0. So, sorry. Unless Mother 3 gets remade in Japan, we are probably never seeing it. And I hope it does. I hope they remake all three of them, to be perfectly honest. I would buy it if they remade Earthbound to be good and like Mother 3, because Mother 3 is a fantastic game. But of course, nowadays, Ness is mainly kept relevant by his inclusion in the Super Smash Bros. Series, because he has been in it since the first game. He is one of 12 characters that has been in every single Smash game. Despite the fact that he has been on the chopping block for just about every single one. He was in Smash 64 to advertise Mother 64, which was in development at the time. That game got canceled, but it was too late. Ness was already in the game. In Melee, he was supposed to be replaced with Lucas, who was the main character of Mother 3. Again, Mother 64 got canceled, so Ness was put in instead. And then Lucas finally made his way into Smash in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And I believe Ness was going to be cut for that too, but ended up not being cut. He was a hidden character instead. They were going to remove him from Wii U, I think, but for some reason decided not to. Lucas was, though, and wasn't added until DLC later on. And then, of course, in Ultimate, everyone is here. And that's the only reason Ness is still in that game.
Everyone remembers from Brawl. Imamade, up until now.
Up until now. Good times. Itoy has since stepped away from the games industry, claiming that if there is a fourth game in the series, he has no interest in being a part of it. And has also said that if somebody else wants to pick up the series, he has no qualms with that. But to which I say, if Itoy is not involved, I don't care. Itoy is like the thing that makes those games good. His involvement, his writing.
He's the straw that stirs the drink and all that.
Yeah. And as Matt put it in our Earthbound episode, very few people get to say, I told the story I want to say, I'm done. Let him just say that. Fans want Mother 4. I think they're nuts. I don't think we need a Mother 4, and if Itoy's not going to make it, I don't want it.
I'd rather get that supposedly secret, but maybe not so secret translation that may be sitting around in Nintendo Europe for Mother 3. I just want that.
I don't believe it's real. Also, after the rocky development of Earthbound, Ape Inc. was dismantled and put back together as Creatures Inc., who is now famous for their work on the Pokemon franchise, among other stuff, alongside Game Freak and under the Pokemon Company.
We've mentioned Creatures Inc. in this show.
Yeah, they make a lot of I believe they make the trading cards, they make a lot of the spin-offs, that kind of thing. So, the music for Earthbound was done by a few people. We'll get to the others in a bit, but for now, I want to focus on Keiichi Suzuki. Keiichi Suzuki was born on August 28th, 1951 in Tokyo, Japan. Not much to be found on his life, honestly, but there is a few things. He is not a game composer. He is just a musician that happened to be roped into doing the music for this game. He joined a band called Hachimitsu Pie in the early 70s. I don't know if that's Hachimitsu Pie, but I'm assuming it's Pie. I don't know.
If you're sticking to Japan, yeah.
Yeah. He released an album with them in 1973. Then later in the 70s, he would co-found and be a regular singer in the band The Moonriders, who I believe are still around, but they don't have a Wikipedia article, so it's hard to tell. They are described often, I guess, as one of Japan's most innovative rock bands. He would later go on to form the Beatniks alongside fellow musician Yukihiro Takahashi, and this is a duo in which he still appears to be a member of today. He has released 3 solo albums, being Captain Hate and First Mate in 2008, Pirate Radio Seasick in 2009, and In Retrospect in 2011, but he hasn't released anything since then.
Good for him for still making music, because if he's pushing 70 soon, that's pretty impressive.
As for his discography, he has done music for 3 games, Mother 1 and 2 / Earthbound, and a game called Real Sound, Cause No Regret. Never heard of it, but it was the only other game mentioned on his discography, so I figured it was worth at least saying the name. He also does a lot of films, and in fact, it seems that films are what he does the most nowadays, including he scored the anime adaptation of Uzumaki, that is Junji Ito's very famous horror manga. That was made in 2000, I believe. I didn't know this. He scored Tokyo Godfathers, which is Satoshi Kon's 3rd film. A very, very good movie. Very weird movie. Oko's Inn, which I believe actually came out like last year. And he, for live action stuff, the only sort of names, obviously I didn't recognize them. They're all Japanese films. But I did recognize a name behind one of them, which is Takeshi Kitano, also known as Beat Takeshi. And he made a series of films with Outrage in the name, and I guess Suzuki is a usual composer on those films. So, as for some development research about the actual game soundtrack itself, not only is Suzuki one of the people that worked on it, but also Hip Tanaka, who we have talked about before, and then Hiroshi Kanazu and Toshiyuki Ueno, who I could not find a damn thing on either of those men, past the fact that they worked on Earthbound. And in fact, Wikipedia doesn't even list them as being composers on the game. You have to scroll down to the music section of the article. It's weird. Inspiration was apparently drawn heavily from the Beach Boys, with Tanaka saying that he would listen to one of their albums often while on his way to Suzuki's home to work on the soundtrack. Other inspirations listed, there were a lot. There were a lot of inspirations listed for the soundtrack of this game, but the main ones that stood out to me were Randy Newman, Ray Bradbury, and John Lennon. Tanaka also says that he listened to the album Stay Awake, various interpretations of music from vintage Disney films a lot during development, which, honestly, I feel like that title probably implies all you need to know about the development environment of this game. Itoi apparently believes that this is the first game soundtrack to incorporate vibrato in its music, which doesn't seem right to me, but I can't name another game before that, so...
One that comes to mind is the opera section in Final Fantasy VI.
That is true.
Just saying.
This game came out the same year as FF6, but a couple of months after.
Yeah.
So, let's get into that critical 5. Remember that mention of the Final Fantasy VI, that might get mentioned. Not during this, but soon. The first one, I'm going to start with one of the first songs you hear in the whole game. One at theme. This song was, of course, done by Keiichi Suzuki. First town in the game, obviously, it's Ness's hometown. And it just has this nice, casual, happy feeling to it. Certainly brings to mind the feeling of being in a small town where everybody knows each other and everybody's just sort of happily living their own lives. And there's not much to say about it other than it's just a nice, happy starting town song.
I think a lot of people sometime peg this as like the main Earthbound theme. So if it's your starting town, like that kind of makes sense. But it's a good one to put here on the list for sure, because it's certainly one a lot of people associate with this game.
Mm-hmm. And it's I think it's my favorite town theme. No, I think I like Dalam better personally, but I think this is a better representation of Earthbound as a whole. After that, we have the best song on the soundtrack. Buy something, will ya? Which is apparently technically an arrangement of Humoresque of a Little Dog from Mother 1, which also then got arranged again for Mother 3, though I forget what the name was and it's not important now. When we talk about Mother 3, I'll probably mention it there. Hip Tanaka wrote that one. I couldn't find a credit for who wrote this one, so I'm assuming Hip Tanaka just handled this one too.
Yeah, I did the composition at least. Maybe someone did the arrangement, but
yeah,
the core of it is key.
It is one of the catchiest shop themes in the history of video games.
Oh, sure.
It's so good. It's so fun to whistle, and like you just picture a banjo somewhere just casually plucking it away. It's so good. It also really fits the idea that this is supposed to be a caricature of suburban America and that kind of thing. Also, shout outs to the Smash remix of this song, which is one of the best remixes in the series and by far the best remix from Mother. Just in general. Oh, such a good song.
Yeah, they really did the song justice in Smash. That's a really good one.
Next up, we have Battle Against an Unsettling Opponent. Here's another thing I gotta really give props to Earthbound for. It's very important to me. I've talked in the past every time we talk about an RPG, I talk about how like your battle theme needs to be good if I'm gonna hear it over and 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 just get tired of it eventually. Earthbound mitigates this by having 10 generic battle themes that play depending on what kind of enemy you are fighting. Which is really good, actually. This is the best one, though. Like, that upright bass part. It's so good. There are a lot of others that are very, very good, but none of them come anywhere near this one.
And you can definitely see where Toby Fox gets inspiration from Earthbound, where we've talked about on past episodes, with things like, the sound overall, but also that title. I mean, it's a long doozy of a title, but that's almost, word for word an Undertale sort of title.
After that, we're going to change gears just a little bit and talk about Pokey Means Business. This one was done by Hip Tanaka. And so this is the first phase of the final boss against Gigas. When Pokey is there taunting you and you're supposed to be aiming at him. This is the song that plays before Gigas becomes the Gigas you know. He doesn't start that way as that weird screwed up swirl skull thing.
So Pokey's in the mech here?
Yes, this is where Pokey's in the mech, and it starts out with a sort of 8-bit melody because Gigas is actually from Mother 1. He's the main antagonist of Mother 1, which is never mentioned a single time in all of Earthbound because his backstory is not important in that game. He's not even, I wouldn't even say he's the main antagonist. It's Pokey all the way, but it's meant to pay homage to that, I think, or we think. Matt's the one that pointed it out to me. But also, after that, it just gets into this super hard electric guitar synth, and it's just sounds corrupted and terrifying, and it's, I think, supposed to be like representing that Pokey is corrupting Gigas as the fight goes on.
Or yeah, that makes sense. Huh. Interesting. Because, yeah, I think Gigas kind of looks almost Mewtwo-like in the original Mother.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where some people thought, like, oh, maybe he can be an Echo Fighter in Smash. No, not at all.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you hear the transition in the clip, and it's pretty jarring. But good electric guitar sounds, at least, for the MIDI on the SNES back then. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good song, and that boss fight is the most memorable part of Earthbound for a reason. It is very well done. Though, something I mentioned in our Earthbound episode, our last one, it's kind of one of those things that was built for the technology at the time. And I don't think I made sense when I was saying it, so I'm not going to get into this all the way. But, like, it's built specifically with the idea that you are going to be looking at it on a CRT. And playing it on HD screens kind of makes it lose a little bit, but not really. I don't know. It's a weird boss fight. And our last song, y'all know what it is already. If you know anything about Earthbound, you already know what the 5th track is. It's Smiles and Tears. This is the song from Earthbound. It's the credits theme, and honestly, it pains me to give it to this game of all things, but I think it's among like top 5 credits songs on the Super Nintendo, easily.
Yeah, I'd say top 5 for sure. Like, it's definitely a track of note and one that you got to know it's from this game. I think, yeah, when random quizzes out there are just saying like, oh, I'm going to play a song from Earthbound, like, I think more often than not it's going to be one that theme. But this is one that, like, if you play the game, you got to know this one. I think I would have a hard time putting it up against like Chrono Trigger's To Faraway Times or things like that. But I'd say top 5 for sure on the SNES, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's just this very nice emotional piece. It incorporates the 8 melodies and also includes near the end, a guy saying, I miss you.
I miss you.
Like in this weird digitized voice. It's odd. And my personal headcanon is that it is in fact Shigesato Itoi saying it. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I can't find a source that says who it is, so prove me wrong, Internet.
Must be one of his ideas that he decided to try out.
And it's weirdly clear for being a digitized voice on a Super Nintendo. It's weird. Yeah. Weird song, weird section, I guess. Anyways, let's get into tracks on the cutting room floor. First one is Frank Battle, but I'm not going to call it that because the name that I've always known it as is Battlin' Frankie Fly. This is one of my favorite battle themes in the entire game. It plays when you fight Frank, who is the first real boss of the game, but also plays when you fight hippies anywhere in the game. Because, lest you forget, one of the enemy types in Earthbound is a hippie. Because America. for a while, this was actually rumored to be the song that was keeping Earthbound from getting a virtual console release because of its similarity to the song Johnny Be Good.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Nintendo just thought it wouldn't sell. And they were right. That's why.
But honestly, you hear this and it's like, yeah, it's real similar to Johnny Be Good.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to claim, copyright or lifting or whatever, but it's just like, I've heard this kind of sound before.
I think that might have been the point, though. I think a lot of the soundtrack was meant to be like, we're going to parody this. Because that's America. This is America to us. We're going to parody it. We're going to parody it. That kind of thing. My other track is not one of my favorite tracks in the game, but I think it's worth noting. Venus Live. There are musical performances in Earthbound. And again, this came out the same year as FF6. Now, granted, none of them are the scope of the opera scene. How could they be? But there are 4 separate musical performances in Earthbound. 3 of them by the Runaway 5, and 1 of them by the lovely Venus. And this is the song that plays during her performance, and this is my favorite of them. It's an okay song. I just figured, it's still a cool novelty to point out that there were musical performances in this game. That was still a weird thing back in the SNES. So what will I never forget about the game? 3 months of my life gone. Nah, to be honest, the actual thing that I will never forget about Earthbound is the Gigas fight. I think the Gigas fight is the best part. And also just the plot of Earthbound's pretty good. The writing in Earthbound is fantastic. It's just that playing the game is not fun. It's not. I'm sorry. I can't bring myself to say a single nice thing about the gameplay of Earthbound. Well, I've said a couple of nice things, but ignore those. I can't bring myself to say a single nice thing. But hey, that Gigas fight is pretty cool. And the writing is pretty fun. And Ness has a baseball bat. And Ness and Lucas are really fun to play in Smash, even though I'm garbage at them.
I like playing as them.
So let's call that good. Let's just say that that's where we're going to end it. Hopefully, God, I hope this is the last time I talk about Earthbound for at least a couple months.
I hope so for your sake too, because I was surprised it was so soon after Smash Your Pieces that it needed to be brought here, but kudos to you for getting through it, and for me for getting through Gears of War. Games that just don't sit too well with us, but also aliens. So that will do it for this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga. You can find the video version of the show on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that podcast MP3 version you really want over at Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. But, get the podcast feed on a variety of podcast storefronts all around the world. Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Take it with you on a run, in your car, listen at work. We won't tell your boss that you're listening to conversations that are about great game soundtracks. The social media for the show is at Soundchat OST, so you can leave feedback on how we're doing with these episodes or any games that you'd like to hear us talk about in the future. We've got some news about the Spotify playlist, actually. Square Enix decided to add Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross to Spotify. Finally, so you can finally get those Chrono Trigger songs up there for you.
Now, granted, technically it's the DS version of Chrono Trigger. I'm still going to add them, though, because, again, we covered this in the episode. They were tooled to sound close to the SNES, as close as they could, at least. So I'm still going to add them. They're still the same songs. They're still great. And And it's a good thing that they were added, because neither Gears of War or Earthbound are on Spotify.
That's kind of surprising. I would have guessed Gears of War should be.
I'm also a little shocked about that. I'm not shocked about Earthbound. Of course, it's a Nintendo game. It's not going to be on. But
sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked. Kevin Riepl has a lot of stuff on Spotify, but Gears of War is not one of the things.
Well, maybe Microsoft will eventually relent and put it up there. But what are we talking about next week?
I'm talking about Joe Hisaishi, which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd be able to say.
I'm glad you are finally talking about him, because he is well deserving of talking about. I am talking about Minako Hamano. 2 games are coming out on a very busy release day, but 2 games in particular we're looking forward to talking about their soundtracks.
September is a hellscape.
It's a crazy month. Anyway, let's play us out.
So I finally had to just go ahead and put one of the videos from this person out. There is a YouTube channel out there called Keeper First that I have been a fan of for a very long time, mainly because the owner of the YouTube channel sometimes films a pianist named Tom Breyer playing various ragtime pieces, sometimes from video games, and it's always a sight read. The video he takes is always him seeing this sheet music for the first time, immediately sitting down and just playing the song. So remember that when you hear this, because this is Tom Breyer's cover of Humoresque of a Little Dog.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.